Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela from Blueberry Flutes. Of course, our website, blueberryflutes.com, where you'll find the latest and greatest Native American flutes available on the web today. As we do each year, or at least we try to each year, I did miss a year or two for very good explained purposes, reasons why it is I missed that. You can figure it out by the dates. But we like to make a Christmas video, and this Christmas video is a revisit of our Christmas video of 2016, where I made this flute out of a cardboard wrapping paper tube. I have said for so long this is one of the favorite flutes that I have ever made, not because of the video, but it's amazing that this cardboard wrapping paper tube flute sounds as good as it does. It just really blows me away. I did use a burning tool after making the video to make the holes a little bit nicer and cleaner and more round, and kind of the way that I usually do with the rest of our flutes. If you haven't seen my other flute videos, this would be a fine opportunity after watching this one to go back and check some of the videos out. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's been a lot of fun and been a big part of my life. But I want to share with you the fine details of making a flute out of a cardboard wrapping paper tube, which I didn't really display as well as, when I look back on this video, which I loved. I didn't display as well as I would like to have. So this is what this little guy sounds like. Really a great flute to be made out of a piece of cardboard. Cardboard is something that a lot of you probably can get, and for that reason I think it's a perfect material for revisiting this video and showing you how to do something that you may not have ever thought about doing before in your life. So we'll get right into that. I'm going to give you some information about the tools and the materials. We do have a supply list that you can download and print out, which is really simple. You'll notice there's no schematics on this. We'll talk about that in a second because that's a very important detail. But something else I'd like to share with you. This little guy here was on our 2022 Christmas video, which is hilarious. I watched it before this. I still have tears in my eyes from watching it. It's so goofy. And then there was another Christmas video, which, like I said, we usually do every year. I did miss a couple of years, and there's some that you might get bored of watching, like the one where I drove a flute 4 hours to a lady's house that was so worried that she wasn't going to get it in time for Christmas. That was a good one. But my three favorite Christmas videos I ever made was the 2016 video, making this, and then playing a Christmas song on it for you. And then the 2022 video, which was this Santa, and like I said, I'm always rolling watching this one. And then the other one, which, we actually literally, all of us, my family that watched this goofy 2019 Christmas video, always laugh out loud and usually bust into tears. That's the reason I didn't watch that one before this, because I'd still be going on about it. But 2019 Christmas video is absolutely hilarious. It has some outtakes. The video, like this one, is only a few minutes long. This one I think was 7 minutes. I think the 19 was 5 minutes. 2016 was just a few minutes. I can't promise this one's going to be as quick, but I can promise you that you'll know how to make a Native American flute out of a cardboard wrapping paper tube by the end of it. So I hope you enjoy this. Like I say, we'll start right off, and I'll tell you what I've got, where we're going, and what we can do. And I've even got some alternative supplies that you can use as well. So let's take a look at this. Okay, so I've got some various cardboard wrapping paper tubes. This one is really, I didn't measure it, but I'm pretty sure it's about 1.25 inches in diameter. Doesn't really matter. The reason I say it doesn't matter is because when it comes to the size of the flute, the fingerings will be varied depending on how big the flute is. If it's a big flute, it's going to have fingerings in a different place than a little flute. And I have a solution for that. I've made a good handful of videos on making various size flutes. The one video that will help you the most is a video that I discuss called adjusting your pattern to fit your material. And that video will help you use the schematics in my flute making book here, such as the low D flute, which is right over here that I have bookmarked. But it'll help you adjust that schematic to fit this size tube, which is what we're going to do right now. So we'll use the measurements from my book, which is, as you'll notice, the bottom of the supply list here, in case you need to do that. The other thing you're going to need is a dowel that will fit the inside of your tube. And when I say fit, snug is best. As a matter of fact, this one is tight snug, which is really perfect. You'll see how it just kind of turns in there. I'm going to put that in there in just a minute because we're not to that step yet. But if you can't find a dowel that fits your tube perfectly, you can always wrap a smaller dowel with some duct tape or with some paper tape, masking tape. This is painter's tape. You can wrap this around a smaller dowel until it fits snugly. And of course, after it fits snugly, and I'm going to set these things off the side because I don't want everything cluttering up what we're doing here. But after it fits snug, you know, it needs to slide in there. If you can get it to move in there, I usually use like a dowel, which we'll do in just a moment to push it through. But if you can do that, then you can kind of super glue it in place and you're not so worried about an air leak, which is going to be your biggest problem in following these instructions, is if you have a minor air leak. Air leak could be from the tube itself, could be usually from your dowel, but that's really the biggest difficulty you might have. Something you've noticed too is at the end of this one is a little tattered. We'll clean all that up in a minute, no worries. This cardboard tube is, check out how flexible, right? Gonna make a great flute. All you need is a hollow tube. It doesn't really matter what it's made out of. And we'll just, like I say, follow along, make some measurements, and go from there. So I'll read you the measurements too. If you have a tube that's roughly this size, these measurements will work for the most part. Like I say, there's some changes you might need to make. This is on page 120 of The Art of Native American Flute Making by Charlie and Jesse Mato-Toyela, the book you've seen pictured here. I can't promise that somebody else's flute making book is going to help you with these measurements, and I can't promise copying someone else's flute is going to give you the most precise, because there's really no telling what you're going to get. But I do know that the amount of time I've spent making flutes in my life, that these here work well. One little thing that if I couldn't think of anything else to talk about even further, which isn't, a lot of you are like, you talk too much. I checked these measurements against the flute pattern that we use for making low D flutes in my shop today. And a phone conversation that I'm reminded of a couple of days ago with a customer, asking about measurements and the like. I referred to the video I mentioned a moment ago about adjusting your pattern to fit your material. Within the history of Blue Bear flutes and my flute making, there was a time that we made a flute that was slightly smaller in diameter, that was a low D than the one we make today, which actually is the measurements that you'll find in my book today. Follow them, it makes a low D. The low D we make today is slightly larger in inside diameter for a number of reasons that I'm not going to get into, but the fingerings are slightly adjusted on my low D flutes we make today. So if you make this and you hold it up next to a low D flute that I've made recently, the fingerings will be slightly different, but like I say, if you follow these instructions, you should have a good result. And if you go back and watch that one video that I'm referring to you, it'll help you a lot. It really will. So the first measurement is the size of the fingerings and the size of the sound hole. Should be roughly 5/16 of an inch in diameter. That's something we just need to remember. The customer I was speaking with the other day had made his sound hole 1/4 of an inch, and he swore up and down that he was following my instructions, but he missed that. It's actually 5/16, and the inside diameter is roughly 1 inch. So we're going to start off with that. We're going to find a place to put our mouthpiece and what size the mouthpiece is going to be, and we're going to mark the mouthpiece hole, and then we're going to move down 6 3/4 of an inch from there to make the first fingering. So I'm just going to lay this up here. Mouthpiece doesn't really matter how far it is from the first fingering, but I'm going to say let's make this one kind of pretty, and we'll put it at roughly 6 inches. So 6 inches to the first concerning hole there. The other hole is going to be dependent on how big your plug is. So let's do that. And then we'll put the other hole here. This is the air supply hole. This is the sound hole. So all the measurements elsewise on my book do not measure from the top of the flute. It actually measures from the sound hole. The sound hole is where the sound begins, and it's critical to the location of the fingering. So let's put this first one at, let's say 6 3/4, I believe is what we said. The next one is 7 3/4. This is a 5-hole flute, by the way. And then after 7 3/4 is 10 5/8, which is right about, let's say roughly here. And then the one after that is going to be 11 7/8. 11 7/8, which is roughly right there. The last fingering is about 13 1/8 from that sound hole. So I'm going to move down just a little bit further, 13 1/8. Okay, then last and most important, the rough length of the flute I have here at about, from the sound hole, is about 19 inches. Let's do about 19 inches here to start. And really, you don't have to do this like I'm doing it for demonstration. You can have somebody help you. It'll be okay. So, we've gone through the measurements. I'm going to tell you one more time. The fingerings and the sound and air supply hole should start off at roughly 5/16 of an inch. The distance from here at the mouthpiece to the first and second holes, the air supply and sound hole respectively, does not matter. The distance between the air supply hole and the sound hole does not matter based on anything other than the size of your plug. You can have a smaller plug, and I'll discuss some other ways to make plugs in just a minute. But you can do any of that and it'll still turn out. The most significant thing, though, is from the sound hole to the first fingering, let's say roughly 6 3/4. The next fingering, roughly 7 3/4. These are in inches, of course. My book also offers these measurements in metric, but you can actually Google inch conversion to metric and do that. Anybody that would like to point out that you can multiply inches by whatever and come up with a metric size is welcome to comment that at the bottom. I like to make some room for y'all to show what you know as well. The third fingering, which is the 5th hole we will have drilled, or bored rather in this case, is going to be 10 5/8 of an inch, 11 7/8 for the next one, and the last fingering is roughly 13 1/8, with the very end of the flute being roughly 19 inches, which I'm simply going to chop off in just a moment so that we have just a pinch extra. Now, something I'm not going to do in this video is tune it with a tuner, only because in this case of doing something fun, it is a waste of time. I will tune it by ear so that it sounds good, and if you look at your tuner and it sounds like this one isn't one way or the other, there's ways to adjust all that, and I'll mention some of it. So, like I say, the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and chop this bottom off, and I've got kind of a wrinkle there in my tube, which has a potential to break and cause an air supply problem. But we're going to leave that wrinkle there. We may super glue it in a minute, but it doesn't look like, from what I'm feeling on the inside, that it's going to leak. So that's good. Save your cutoff. The cutoff piece here is actually quite handy, and if you want to go ahead and do this right now, you can measure the distance in between the air sound hole and the air supply hole and make this just a little bit longer, and it will become your saddle style block. A saddle style block is one that wraps around the flute. I'm just going to set this over here, and when it wraps around the flute, it'll create a nice little seal, as we hope it will. And this is how it's going to look, but not right yet. So I'm just going to slide down right about there in a minute when we get to it. First, something I like to do in the shop when we're making plug type flutes like this, where the plug goes into the round tube, is I like to go ahead and cut out my sound hole. I like to cut that square. Just trying to make sure I cut it without tearing too much, if I can help that. There we go. How about that? Now this is about 1/4 of an inch. And of course, let me turn around. The little piece of scrap is still inside, which we'll straighten up in a minute. But now that we've got it cut, it's easier with this very sharp hobby or X-Acto knife, as you may. It's easy to clean it up if you'll watch what I'm doing here. One thing I'd like to warn you against too, if you're a young person and you don't have very good skills with a knife, or if you're an older person and for whatever reason you think it's dangerous to use a hobby knife or tool like this, my recommendation is be very careful and have somebody help you. I've made videos in the past where people have all but broke into tears because they seen my fingers getting close to this knife and they felt like I was going to hurt myself, when in reality I have tools in my shop that could rip your entire arm off, and they never once worry about that. So I just like to point that out because I am very careful with this knife, as you may have noticed. I don't have to do this right now. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up just a smidgen. Okay. It's actually not too terrible bad. I originally told my wife yesterday, before we discussed all the procedures of filming this video, which we've been talking about this video forever, I told my wife I want to make a first run cardboard flute again out of this tube to make sure that I look good on camera in doing so. But this gives me confidence that I didn't need to do that, and of course I didn't. So the next thing we're going to do, if you watch, is just twist this booger in here. You notice mine's rough. This is actually a red cedar dowel that we use for making some of our flutes. I don't even remember which one this is. It's probably an A, just as a guess. But it's rough on the outside because it hasn't gone through my dowel sander yet. And it was actually a scrap to begin with. I'm going to push this dude through here. Just pushing. I don't want to collapse my dowel. There he goes. There we go. I was afraid it was going to be too tight for a minute. Okay, we're getting close. Oops, too far. I knew that was going to happen. There we go. Let me see if I can shove it back a little bit. Something I do in the shop when this happens is I take my heavier dowel and I just drop it. You can watch. Probably went too far. Real close though. That sudden impact really moves that dowel how you want it to. Let's see where we're at. Oh, that's it right there. You can see, I don't know if you can see it as good as I can, but right there is our plug. So we're good. I'm going to go ahead and shoot some glue in there so that it kind of seals it off a little bit. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of making a sound right now, right? Okay. So I brought these dowels for this exact purpose of bumping this thing in here and out of there, and I brought them to show you that you can get dowels of any size. You can buy them at your hardware store. This is one from a dowel supplier that supplies to large chain hardware stores that I used to buy dowels to make flutes out of, until eventually during those couple of years that we didn't make Christmas videos. Once again, you can figure out why. If you look at their timeline historically, it'll make perfect sense. Anyway, these people didn't go out of business, but they had some struggles and I needed flute material, so I bought a machine to make my own dowels. Hence, I wish I could smell that. This Eastern Red Cedar dowel, this beautiful little dowel that has even got some cracks, and it's just a scrap I picked up off the dowel scrap box, which we have. But I'm just cleaning that. I'm going to shoot this glue in here. And let's see. When you put the glue in there too, something you want to keep in mind is that what you're trying to seal is the circular edge, which means I'm trying to run it around in circles. Just kind of dripping it out in each corner that I can. It's probably soaked up pretty well already. I'm going to put just a drop right here where the track area is about to go, because that'll help seal the edges of it. These edges here are kind of important, but we'll get to that in just a second. Let's go ahead and cut this air supply hole though, because for most of you, if you are a flute maker already or you're aspiring flute maker, your biggest concern is getting it to play. And I've had so many people email me through the years. I hope you'll forgive my talking while this is going on. Had people email me through the years. I have my flute to make the root note. Now where do I put my fingerings? And just like making this cardboard flute here, it's actually a good idea to know where your fingerings are going to go based on the diameter of the flute before you start making it. I've got a video about that. I just told a customer that called me earlier today that anytime people ask me a question, I usually respond with, I have a video for that. 2 people in the last 2 days have asked me about tuner videos, and I was searching my YouTube channel, and I've got a half dozen videos about using a tuner. I sent the ones to each of them that seemed appropriate for their questions. But the biggest problem we have that I find in life is communication. And a lot of you work best by watching somebody do something. And that's where we're at right here. Okay, so that looks good. Not too bad. I'm going to blow through it and see what happens. Seems like it's pretty solid there. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do in order to make this flute make a sound, and I really should have used a pencil to do this, but I can see well enough to do it, is I'm going to draw a straight line with my hobby knife here from the sound hole back to the air supply hole. We want this to be as straight and as well matching the width of this hole as we can, because the air needs to meet it as perfectly as possible. And now, dealing with that little bit of extra glue there, which is not a problem. You see how it's soaked in? Like I said, that's really a very handy thing. Now, from this point, there's a couple different ways you can do it. This metal file works good. A cardboard like nail file works good. I've got videos on doing this so many different ways, but what I'm doing is just making a starting point where I've cleaned up some of the fuzz off of that. I'm also going to clean as much of this as I can, and then I'm going to put a drop of glue underneath of this, what we call a splitting edge, or the knife edge, as I've called it for so many years. Put that drop of glue right there. Something else, a little word of warning: if you use super glue, you should do it in a well-ventilated area. I'm going to use this piece of excess cardboard to wipe that around a little bit. How about that? You shouldn't touch it either, by the way. Touching super glue is kind of a no-no. So as it's drying there, I'm going to do this, just trying to flatten out this area a little bit and clean up some of that. I'm also going to file this one down a little bit. The sandpaper's in here in case this file doesn't do all the trick. We'll get to that in a second as well. So if you can get any of these pieces out, I recommend it highly, because it may blow and stop up your flute. Let's see if this is getting dry. Oh my goodness, it's almost here, because it's like hard as a rock. I might even be able to pry it a little bit. This sucker is really in there. Very, very hard. So still a little moist, as you'll see it picking up on my file. Now, getting glue on your file will destroy your file, by the way. But we heat these up in the shop, not so much that it re-anneals them, but just enough to get whatever debris off of them that we make. Okay. And I'm going to file this little edge right here, which is a critical thing to do with any Native American flute we make, is filing this edge. I'm only filing it a little bit. This is a very fine file. Okay, but you see it put just a tiny little bevel on there. That will make the flute play so much better. So I got one little straggler here that might be wispy. Oh, that's better. Okay, so now let's try it and see if it makes that root tone so many people are concerned about. I'm just going to hold it with my hand. Not really that bad. That's actually pretty good. If I could make the track here a little bit more deep, just a smidgen, and keep it nice and flat across that plane. Also, now that this is dried some, I have the potential to do that some more. But if I can make it nice and flat here, that will produce an even better sound. So something I talk about in my flute kit videos is if you bunch up a piece of sandpaper like this, you can actually push this little end here and make something of a flat section. Any of you that know geometry, if you can tell me what it's called when you take something around and push it into a flat triangle, help me remember what that is. I forget. Okay, one more time. Flipping it around this way. So many different ways you can do this. I've actually got a video I'll mention here while we're doing this called "The Best Track for Your Native American Flute," and that video is not about like backing tracks. It's about this piece here we're making right now, which is like one of the critical and often forsaken parts of the flute process. I've seen so many flutes and even done a repair job on a couple recently, and I've got one in the shop I'm doing a repair job on right now. Flute's beautiful. It just doesn't play good, and it's not one of mine. It's one that a person that I offered to fix it for him sent me, the flute maker that made it was more concerned with how the flute looked than how it played, and unfortunately I've run into that a lot of my life. But I think it might sound a little different now. Let's try it out and see what happens. And really, for our experiment purposes, I'm going to go ahead and put this rubber band on here. If you noticed, I've got another origami bird which we're going to put up there eventually, but not yet. Decorations come last. That's really not too bad. It is really not too bad. I'm pleased with that already. I do know it's at least an inch too long, so we'll get to that. We're going to go ahead and make the bottom fingering first. And if you've not seen me do this, I do have a pump drill video where I made a flute with a bow and a pump drill. I just kind of marked it like this, spinning it around in circles. If you find that makes the hole too fuzzy like it is right here, you may want to use a different technique. There's a couple of different files you can use for this. One is a chainsaw file that I grew up using. I remember I was about 5 years old the first time I had to sharpen a chainsaw. That's not too bad. The chainsaw file is basically like the end of the handle of this little file here, and it's made for doing this kind of thing, round work, if we can call it that. This flute, as I said, I burned the holes in after I made them like this. It really does a number on it. Let's see what this sounds like. Just going to uncover this hole. I'm going to go ahead and finish the holes, and then I'm going to cut the bottom off and tune. I already know where it needs to go. I can tell by listening to it. But we'll get to that in a minute. So this twisting around technique is one that I've been doing with my pocket knives since I was a little fella, as a way to drill a hole. It is the most common historic way that most peoples of the world have done this kind of thing. Feels like I'm shaving the inside of this right here with a razor. That's what it sounds like. Okay. So, let's see if we can round it up a little bit. I will go back over these holes in a moment with some super glue once I'm a little happier with their tones. I'm going to try this one. Sounds like this bottom one needs to be just a pinch bigger already. That's okay. Okay. And the next, let's go ahead and do this fingering. It's a soft spot of my cardboard, so I'm going to put some tension on it over here. There's really no better way to do this than with a burning tool. That burning tool will cauterize and harden this cardboard as you're doing this, and it just makes such a world of difference. Okay. Okay, let's see how that one sounds. Yeah, I can definitely hear that this third fingering, which usually needs to be bigger, and this second fingering, which also usually needs to be bigger, are likely going to need to be bigger. We'll get to that in just a minute. And cutting the end of it off. It almost pains me to hear something out of tune like this these days. Okay, one more time. Let's try that and see what happens. Okay. Notice my thumb is touching the back side of the blade, not the sharp side. Using it as a guide. I've been carving and whittling most of my life. So if I use my finger as a guide to hold a blade, it's because I know what I'm doing, not because I'm about to cut myself with this. And it's going to be a life-changing event for me. It's not at all. So something else I'm going to show you in a second too is another way that you can make these holes not only nice and round, but also clean up those fuzzies. Before I do that, let's see what the old girl sounds like. Notice my fingerings are off just a pinch, but we're going to have to change that anyway. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is chop just a pinch of this off, which really the measurement in my book should be just a pinch too long to begin with. Let's see. Almost sounds like it's in a major key. No. Any of you that are not accustomed to doing something like this by ear, you can always use another instrument as a guide. If you know what the minor pentatonic scale is and you want to make this close but you're not so worried about making it exact, you could play that minor pentatonic scale on another instrument and say, well, this sounds like that. Here's an example too. We can use this just to get an idea of the distances between the notes. Let's see how close we are on this. So close. Bigger hole right here. Okay, you fingering. Something else that is kind of obvious, but you need to know is that even though the size of the fingering may be one size, that debris that's inside of it is changing the tone of the note a little bit and needs to be addressed. So here's that technique I was going to tell you. You can take a piece of sandpaper like this and roll it into the shape of a cone and use this cone to change the shape. I said fingering. Let's do this one just a pinch. Let's see where we're at here. Almost. So I'm just going to sit here and whittle on this for a moment. You can watch me do this and what have you. We might even speed it up. It's just a process. Okay. So that's actually pretty close there. What I'm going to do now is seal the edges of these fingerings with some super glue, which will make them nice and solid, and it'll help me go back with this piece of sandpaper and clean them up, because the super glue actually hardens the cardboard. And I'm just going to say, just put a little bit around the edges of each of these fingerings. Something of a trick in doing this. There's probably 1,001 other ways to do this, like you could put it on the end of a Q-tip. You can see some smoke coming off of it. Okay. Like I said, you need to do this outside because this stuff is an eye irritant. It's bad for your sinuses. It does a lot of different stuff. if you had a means to, I do have a video about this. I'd recommend going back over it and I have a video where I show how to put a sanding rod up in there. As a matter of fact, we did that with one of our last videos about making a bamboo walking stick. I showed a dowel that I took and put some sandpaper on the end of it. If you did that and spun it while you went up in here, even by hand, it would clean all those loose fibers up. So no worries on those. In the meantime, however, what we need to do is fix our little bird on top, which fortunately his little chest spreads apart some like that and like that. The last one I hot glued on here. If you'll notice, hot glue works out pretty good. But I'm going to super glue this one because I didn't want to have to deal with hot glue today in this video. And we're just going to put a pinch. Also, if I haven't said it, be incredibly careful when you use super glue. Not only is it bad to breathe, okay, it will stick your fingers together. And it's not just fingers. If you get a drop of this on your eyelid, it'll stick your eyelid together. In the shop, we have experienced so many different things. There we go. I'm just going to hold this guy down. And then I'm going to show you, while it's drying, I'll show you a couple of interesting things. Put the lid back on that. There we go. So, as I mentioned, you know, various cardboard tubes can make various flute sizes and tones, and you need to pick a flute out that you're going to make. And once again, if you're using my schematics, that's based on you know, the diameter of your material. This is a really good tube. I wish I could remember what it came out of, but this one will make an excellent flute. It's a little smaller than my other one. Well, smaller in length, larger in diameter, just a pinch, so it might even make about the same tone flute. But something you got to consider is the diameter of the material you're using. One good place I wanted to show that you could get a dowel or a tube from, and this could probably be used for a plug, to be honest with you. This is a name brand press and seal type adhesive for food, and this cardboard tube inside of it looks an awful like a very good little high D flute, which I might go ahead and make in just a minute. I did bring myself a dowel, I think, that fits this thing. Yep, I did. So you know, if you can't find the right size dowel, like I said, if it's only a pinch too big and it's not going in there, sandpaper, sand it down, and then you can push it through. If it's too small, wrap it with, really, paper tapes is good. I mean, this thing's paper to begin with, but I think I'm going to go ahead in a minute and make a high D flute out of this one and see if I can get it to turn out as good or better than the one I just finished. But like I said, this is the tube out of the inside of something that you might have in your kitchen right now. So many other size tubes. I mean, the size of these tubes all vary so greatly. Some of them are more firm. This is a nice firm wrapping paper tube. This one is a little less. I will tell you that some of them fit inside of one another, so if you wanted to make a smaller mouthpiece to go onto your larger flute, there's a way you could graduate it down until eventually, of course not shoving the whole thing through, just cutting little pieces, you could actually graduate it down per se until you had a small mouthpiece. Just don't shove the mouthpiece in your mouth. It's cardboard. But there's such a variety of tubes and styles and everything that are just laying around everywhere. I've got some really firm ones that are nice. This one here, like I say, is quite solid for making a flute out of, and it's got these neat stripes on it. You may or may not like those, but hey, you know, you can paint the sucker color. You know, if you wanted to change the color of it, you could make it black, white, or candy stripe. One of my favorite YouTubers is always saying that. But anyway, this is a good tube. Like I said, it's even got a good sound to it when I touch it. So that was something that I had thought about early on. And let's see, I might go ahead and trying to sand out some of these fingerings. I can't help but feel like I want to just take this thing to the shop and burn these fingerings again, but I don't really have to. It plays. And if you are more patient and not trying to make a video for thousands, nay, millions of people in the world to watch on doing this, and you weren't in a hurry to do so, you probably could make these fingerings a little more round and a little bit more in line with one another. You might even use a pencil and draw a straight line to make sure that they do this, that, or the other how you want them to. But me, like I say, I'm just eyeballing this. This isn't the first flute I've made. Probably today, this week, and definitely not this lifetime. Just kind of rounding them off a little bit. Some of them worked out pretty good. This one here, not so happy with. And then there again, they're a little rough on the top. Hey, check it out. Cardboard changed just like wood. Now, a lot of you are thinking, well, if I wanted to make this flute hard, I would just cover it in super glue. I will tell you that isn't a possibility. But I have a photo of a friend of mine who thought that would be a good way to do his flute, and he put super glue all over the flute, and he was going to turn it on the lathe in his little workshop. And he sent me a picture of himself when he went to the hospital. His face was just really red with irritation, and his hands and stuff with breathing that stuff in. Super glue ain't nothing to play with. It really isn't. The fact that I use it on this stuff, I did it indoors, where I'm recommending highly that you do anything with super glue outdoors. You need to know that I've had experience with it. I know how much to use and how much not to use and what to and not to do with it. But long story short, I'm not too unpleased with it. I think it's pretty good. And with that bottom note sounding a little sharp, it tells me that I do need to make these holes just a pinch bigger. Those are probably close, but if I make these a pinch bigger, I could actually round them over in that direction so that they match the size and position of these a little better. So this a lot of fun. Like I say, something that I enjoyed with the first one. Now I have a low tone cardboard wrapping paper tube flute, and I think I'm going to go learn some new Christmas songs on it. Anyway, if you haven't thought about watching the other videos I mentioned, please make sure you do. They're really cool. Some of them are absolutely hilarious, and has been a lot of fun in making them. So your supply list is there for you. I've got a book if you want a bunch of schematics. I've got several videos that you can scroll through and grab various schematics out of. This one here I just mentioned to you roughly. Like I said, it'll work for anything between 7/8 of an inch in diameter to say almost 1.5 inches. Will be really close. But that's basically it. Easy peasy. Now it's time for cleanup. Anyway, I hope that this has helped you all out a lot. I hope you have a great holiday season. I'm looking forward to a wonderful new year, and looking forward to some positive changes in the world that I really have a lot of hope are going to happen. So anyway, and I'm not being political. I'm talking about things that some of you don't even know about are going on, both outside of my life and within my life. But anyway, you guys take care. Enjoy your cardboard wrapping paper tube flute that I hope you get a chance to make very carefully with those knives and with the super glue. And come back and see us again here very soon. This is Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for Blue Bear Flutes and bluebearflutes.com. Don't forget you can find us on TikTok and Instagram under Blue Bear Flutes as well. Take care. We'll see you soon.